So to evoke the question about where I see Pan-Africanism using them as the examples is a bit difficult in this time where the
Mm.
industry has matured. They were the beneficiaries of an immature industry. It was not industrious enough to recognize how to manipulate the message to maximize profit. Now it is.
Living a dream, living the African dream. Welcome to the Pan African Hub, the Pan African Lifestyle Show. I am your host, Harrison Paul, and today we have a very, very special guest, a truly, truly global artist that transcends borders and cultures. Hubert Nathaniel Dawkins III, also known to the world as Aloe Blacc, is a Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter and philanthropist. From soul-stirring anthems like I Need a Dollar to his iconic features on Avicii's Wake Me Up, which top charts across 22 countries, Aloe Blacc's music speaks to the human experience, blending soul, folk, and global rhythms. His latest release, Don't Go Alone, it draws directly from an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Today we dive into Aloe's creative journey, his African inspirations, and how he is using his platform to empower communities across the diaspora. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, and to all our pals, welcome Aloe Blacc. Aloe Blacc, what a pleasure to have you on, sir.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna be honest today. I'm fanboying a little bit. I got a fanboy. You are one of the kings of soul. Really, we gotta give you that. You give you your flowers, man.
Thank you, sir.
So listen. We, of course, it's the Pan African Lifestyle Show. We want to talk about you as a Pan Africanist. We want to talk about you as a vocalist. We want to talk about even some of your greatest moments in the industry and moments that really have stuck with the people. But listen, your music, sir, carries such a deep message that is connected with people across all different backgrounds. How has African traditions, proverbs, or rhythms influenced your songwriting?
Wow. In many ways, but very directly on my most recent album called Stand Together, there's a song called Don't Go Alone. And when I was in the studio creating this song, there was reference to an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that really inspired a discussion around how in society today, and especially in American society, I should say, there's this concept of rugged individualism. Do it all by yourself. Prove that you did it by yourself. Don't ask for help. And it throws um, a lot of the age-old wisdom out uh, really um, irresponsibly. And so in this conversation I had with the producer and some of the other musicians that were in the room was we should be finding ways to work together and to go farther because who wants to go fast? There's this concept in music and other parts of our society, Western
Mm-hmm.
society, live fast, die young.
Mm,
Well, who wants to die young? Maybe you
mm,
want to live fast, but nobody wants to die young. So
mm,
how about we go together and we go farther rather than
mm.
just going alone and going fast?
I can see that OG-ness kicking in now. Aloe, you definitely have an OG mentality. I can give that because you are seeing the trends, I guess, of how we things that we'll say that sound cool or feel cool, and you're just trying to refocus us as a community. And you know what? I should have known when that record came out, when obviously your biggest records that reached Ireland, that I would have known first. I should have known that there was a man behind that who was in love with the community, and it's very interesting to hear your, I want to say, deep love and how intentional you are with influencing our community. And when did this come about? How did this come about? Is it just always been who you are, or?
A lot of it has to do with hip hop influencing me at an early age. When I
Mm,
was young, I was listening to artists like Public Enemy, artists
mm,
like Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul, NWA, and there was a certain um, awareness of blackness as an American, a certain awareness of our Pan-Africanness, the diaspora,
mm,
especially in the words and um, stylings of the native tongue family, which was a cohort of hip hop groups and artists at that time. And it was very pro-black and what KRS-One would call edutainment,
mhm, mhm,
entertainment that will educate you about
mhm,
who you
mhm,
are
mhm,
and who you can be
mhm,
and where you come from. So I would say that was the beginning. But what really, really got me was engaging with local Black organizations and organizations that support communities of color in Los Angeles. One in particular being the Coalition of South LA,
mm,
that was founded by the now mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass. And they really instructed me and gave me an ideology to espouse about how I can show up as an artist in
mm,
solidarity with and
mm,
in representation of the community.
mm. And now you've really opened a can of worms there. I do a bit of a hip hop myself. I am a rapper and I'm as well as a host of the show. And it's been one of my passions watching where our industry has gone to. And like you said, it all started hip hop at the soul, heart and soul of what it was education. It was enlightenment. It was cool to be conscious.
Mhm.
The conscious brother was some of the coolest brothers around. And then over time, I know there is a pattern of people blaming the black community, but I think our expression of pain transformed into a very sadistic and I want to say perpetuative, narrative rather than it being this is an unfortunate situation that I'm going through. It, the glorification of it took a whole new life where now it actually made a kid want to maybe pick up a gun and do other things like that in order to keep up with what the culture was saying. When initially it was supposed to be a cry, a cry. Maybe yes, there are elements where we are very descriptive about the things that happen in the ghettos, and it was supposed to be a very unfortunate truth, and it took this new place, and it's just so unfortunate that this is where we are as hip hop culture, and I'm so interested in hearing, you know what I mean, especially when you think about your song "I Need a Dollar." There in that record, there is the I can say elements of the struggle of a black man in there, of like maybe
Yeah.
kind of coming up from a certain position, and that's the type of stuff that we love in hip hop culture, of like came from nothing and made something of ourselves, right? And before I assume you did come from that, you wrote that at a time maybe that you were generally going through that at that time.
Um, it was inspired by decades and decades of pain and suffering and struggling. I was
Mm,
listening to recordings that were made of chain gang workers. Now, in the US, there was a Jim Crow era after emancipation. The white Southerners would find really, really heinous ways to incarcerate black folks. So you could do something simple and you're going to jail.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And you could be any age. And part of that then became the forced labor force that they didn't have access to anymore. So now, if they incarcerate you, you can then become a slave to the
mm-hmm,
government, and it's literally still in our legislation. It's the
mm-hmm,
13th Amendment. If you are incarcerated, punished for a crime, you you can be uh, put to work and forcibly. So that was negotiation I think that happened during the Emancipation Proclamation was that okay, we're going to free them, but as soon as we can, we're going to incarcerate them so that we can legally enslave them again. And there were some recordings of chain gangs. These are the folks who are working on railroads or doing whatever kind of, works to create streets and buildings. And um, they were singing their own songs, making up their own songs.
Mm.
And I Need a Dollar is a mimic of the chain gang style of song. So that's where it came from. It's not necessarily my direct individual pain, although I had been laid off from my corporate job. So there's some
Wow.
of that in there when I talk about the boss man
Mm.
let me go. But really, it is the multitude of stories combined into one.
Mm. Don't Go Alone taps into, like you said, the African proverb that you mentioned earlier in the interview. And I just want to clarify as well. You just mentioning what you were going through. Are there any other things in your life at that time that drew you to this message?
Um, yeah, there's the organization called the Phoenix, which
Mm.
is an amazing anti-addiction organization that helps people recover from substance abuse and substance
Mm.
misuse.
Mm.
And um, I had an opportunity to meet the founder of this organization, and that way that they engage with community activity, communal activity like exercise, hiking, bike
Mm.
riding, fitness training, that is their modality to combat addiction, to
Mm.
combat the falling off the wagon and going back to
Mm.
using substance.
Mm.
You create an accountability partnership with the people around you. And that, I think, is, really, really smart. And I feel like it was certainly um, part of the inspiration for this song.
Mm. And I've got so much questions, even on a personal level in regards to your taste and your style. So I'm now getting an idea that you're an artist that writes from a deeper place, which already in itself is very refreshing. And now it's only striking me that there is very much what can I call that? A Jim Crow vibe and era of like old school soul in your music. And I'm sitting here thinking, what what kind of inspired your genre? Because I'm obviously, we know I Need a Dollar, then we have the Avicii, and we have these which all work so wonderfully, you know. Um, obviously, I think if I put two and two together, obviously I Need a Dollar did so well, and you went off into do house music like that. But have you always been someone who was like, you know what, despite everything sounding the way it does, in the industry, I really am. I'm digging this kind of old school vibe. What inspires you to be like because you're so different in how you attack the beat, if I can say. What inspired that?
Um, every song is different. I want the music that the lyrics are attached um, to be the best vessel for the message. And
Mm,
I Need a Dollar felt like a soul song. It's
mm,
really a folk song, but in order to deliver the message, I don't know that an a cappella folk song would have made the same impact. So
mm,
I put it in the capsule of soul, throwback soul music.
mm,
The Man is a message that was, for me, it was going to be a hip hop song, but instead I decided to sing the lyrics rather than rap the lyrics. I
Yes.
think it
Okay.
was easier for me to communicate singing than rapping at the time, even though the beat very much could have been a hip hop beat. And
Mm-hmm.
it was the right vessel for this message. And then for Wake Me Up, I have an acoustic version. Of course, Avicii has the dance version. The dance version did
Mm-hmm.
way better from a
Mm-hmm.
commercial sense. And so
Mm-hmm.
that it was the right vessel to distribute the message broadly and wide. Um, so yeah, a lot of times the musical genre is only in service of distributing the message in the best way. So for me, it's not about genre, it's more about theme. And I consider the music that I make um, in this theme that I call AIM. It stands for
Mm-hmm.
affirmation, inspiration, and motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for my songs to be the soundtrack to you living your best life, to be the songs that inspire you to achieve the most impossible dream.
Mm. Wow. And I'm thinking of artists like, actually, before I ask that question, I will ask you, what is your favorite way? What is your favorite vehicle that you're like, this is really, you're really getting Aloe Blacc when I put it on a plate for you in this manner?
Hmm. Um, yeah, let's see. You're really getting Aloe Blacc. Um, wow. Let's see. If it's on my album, you're really getting Aloe Blacc. That's probably the
Mm,
best way to say it. Sometimes I'm doing guest appearances and collaborations,
mm,
and I'm serving the collaboration, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
that has to do with me also being a good partner in putting a
Right,
song
right,
together with
right.
somebody
Yes,
else,
yes.
and maybe, working with someone else's vision, you know.
100%. Yeah.
But if it's my solo release or my solo album, uh, yeah, that's quite often purely my concept and my idea.
Hmm. So I'm trying to put you, don't want to say in a box. I'm trying to put you now sitting with you and getting behind the man behind the music. And I'm getting a guy who's very intentional and also a Pan Africanist and someone who's standing for the community, writing projects solely based on being inspired by initiatives that are going towards our community. And I think of artists like Nina Simone, who were a carrier for historic records, and just what she stood for, what she was, and you know what I mean. Would you like your name amongst those people when it comes to being a storyteller?
Um, yes. So I always say I want my songs to sit on the shelf next to Bill Withers and Stevie
Mm,
Wonder, certainly Nina Simone,
mm,
um, because they were songwriters and they were singers themselves.
mm,
So, a lot of that has to do with how popular my songs get. But even beyond just the popularity, the quality of the songs,
mm,
hopefully the right people who making the right judgments will recognize what I'm doing and
mm,
that there was an artistic quality, but there was also an important social quality.
mm. And how do you see, this project coming up now resonating with the people?
Um, my goal is to inspire my peers. So as much as this music is for my audience and
Mm,
to amplify the organizations and the community leaders that I am honoring through these songs, it's to inspire my peers to use their voices to do the same. I've made
mm,
an entire album full of songs that are in service of community concepts, but I would just ask for other artists to do just one song. Find a
mm,
nonprofit organization in your neighborhood. Find an important social um, campaign that you want to get behind, and use
mm,
your art to amplify that campaign. for the
Mm.
betterment of humanity, of the community.
Mm. And since you talked about influencing your peers, which is a very, very powerful message, we're not going to get you in any sticky situation by asking you, about other people's careers. Of course not. But I want to, bring that back up in regards to like when you see the music industry in the state that it is today, where substance is lacked on a major level. Um, do you feel disheartened? Do you feel disappointed?
Well, there are plenty of artists who are doing the message music. They just don't get the
Mm,
support from the major industry.
mm-hmm.
The ones that do get support from the major industry um, are certainly looking out for self before community,
Right.
and that's to be understood.
Mm,
For the most part, artists are very self-centered individuals.
mm,
Um, when it comes to their art, it's
mm,
very, especially musicians. Um, it's about delivering their message, and if they are trying to make music to make a living or to make money, so many times it's compromised by using the quickest, easiest way to attract attention. So, that's through controversy.
right.
Controversy could be a broken heart, it could be
Right.
fight, it could be,
Right.
um, uh, uh, bad mouthing or violence, it could be drugs. So, all of these things that are the
Mm,
easy things to do, right? And that's what, the majority of music is right now, like 90% broken hearts,
right.
you know, um, maybe 10% drugs. And in there are variations of how that broken heart is a fight, or the drugs is part of a broken heart, or
Right.
whatever.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
had three huge songs, none of which are either of those, right? So I try to find narratives that are outside of that, um, and find ways to use my music to speak to messages that are beyond the simple narratives that the industry is sponsoring. So I can't really, um, you know, uh, I think, uh, punish other artists
Right.
for
Right.
for how they represent, because a lot of the times is the money that's behind it
Right.
is the incentive. But there are
Right.
plenty of artists who are not doing that. They just don't get the visibility.
Hmm. I know you just said something that I remember because as well as being a rapper, I am a singer as well. I remember I was working with a producer one time, and I wrote this song, and I have a Christian background, by the way, so there's a bit of a conscience there when it comes to
Hmm.
what I put in the music because I always say I want to make music that my mom doesn't have to cringe listening to it,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what inspired me at first. But I remember I wrote this love song with deep love or whatever, and the producer was like, "No, you know what? You gotta put something in it that's like, I put something like provocative or something kind of like vulgar because some everything that's doing well has some vulgarness in it. You gotta give that to the people. It's what they want." And I remember then I stood my ground on that. The reason I did was because you mentioned yourself, and I love how you said it. Three of your biggest records all came from just a pureness, and I think one of the artists I always say this, one of the artists that we love so much that is held in such a high regard is Michael Jackson. And one of the things that I love about Michael is that the guy was so genuine. Like when you actually listen to what he was singing about and listen to what he was talking about, and it's very much what you're saying. It's like even his relationship that conducted in with women, it was so genuine, you know, and there
Yeah.
wasn't this I want to use you, or you know what I mean, or come, or that kind of way where you're kind of trivializing, a woman or love or anything like that, and we loved him, and I think that's why people cried and people passed out and people because it was a guy who was so genuine and honest. And nowadays, everyone wants to be Mike. We're saying so and so is the next Mike. We're saying so and so is the next Mike. And it's like, I don't think people understand it wasn't because he danced and sing. It was that integrity within his art that actually made him last and stand so long. So I love that you noticed for yourself that I never have to lose integrity in order to sell a big record, because it was integrity that made those records resonate so much with people. It's really good that you've caught that.
You know, I would always say that my goal is to ultimately be able to donate as much money as Michael Jackson did in his
Mm,
career, which was something like $250 million.
mm,
And that's my marker of success,
mm.
you know? We'll see.
Are you
Hopefully
a
I'll be
big
able to
MJ
get
fan?
there. Say it again?
You a big MJ fan?
Yeah, I grew up as a Michael Jackson fan. There's a certain era that I like the best. So I'm Off the Wall and Thriller and Jackson 5 and early solo Michael Jackson. When we get into the what Bad was the first album that I actually one of the first albums I actually had of my own.
Mm,
And so I know it front to back, but as I got older, it was the earlier stuff that I liked better. Um, and uh, later albums are also great, but there's just something about the work with Quincy Jones that gets me.
mm, mm. And then it makes me ask, every singer has a singer that they learn to sing through. Is that correct in me saying that? Because I know you're a great singer.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's someone you said, oh, the way he kind of executed his vocal, he or she, you kind of get that. Who would you say was the vocalist that you learned to sing through? You know, when maybe you were playing the records and that the riff
Mm.
was the one that you tried to get and whatnot.
Um, Stevie Wonder and Bill Withers would probably
Mm-hmm.
be Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Bill Withers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the next part I want to go into is your philanthropy work, right? And I want to figure out how, like, understanding your roots and your cultural, historical, or personal, roots has informed in the way you give back. But before we get into that, I want to know your background. What is your background even past? Do you know what it is past America?
Um, so yeah, there's the immediate previous country before my parents immigrated, which was Panama, Central America. Both of my parents were born and raised there. They immigrated to the U.S. In From Panama, they were raised by parents, I believe, that were both born in Panama, but their grandparents would have come from the islands.
Mm,
So on my dad's side, it was Jamaica, that we know of. For my mom's side, it was Grenada, and the interesting thing is when we go back to when I visited Jamaica, I would see regions in Kingston that were named the same as my legal last name. And so I recognized the actual depth of the slave history in my ancestry
mm-hmm.
just by visiting Jamaica and seeing my name there, you know?
Mm-hmm. And how is that, or discovering that, or that discovery, influenced the way you move and the way you desire to give back in the work that you do?
You know, it is just a real eye opener that there is this historic wound on
Mm,
humanity
mm,
that still is bleeding, has
mm-hmm,
yet to be repaired properly. Um, and I think it's probably humanity's most important um, challenge,
Mm,
because this reckoning and this recognition will be one that allows for the healing and transformation of so many other geopolitical and global relationships,
mm,
uh, to recognize and to acknowledge and to repair. It
mm,
would then presuppose and almost uh, necessitate the repair of current um, traumas and transgressions.
mm, mm. And how locked in are you right now? You mentioned about where things are at the moment. I think you kind of alluded to people like the Burkina Faso leader. Are you someone who's kind of watching closely, and Africa's getting a hold of its resources and the revolution that's taking place?
It's a big deal. It's a really big
Mm.
deal. Think about the rhetoric that's coming from the current administration in the US
Oh yeah,
about about nationalism and keeping others out
yeah,
and making people pay their fair share.
yeah,
Okay, keep that same energy.
yeah,
All good. If that's the way you feel, keep
yeah.
that same energy.
Oh yeah,
Stay out of Africa, right? And so, the things that you learn that don't get taught in school. I don't even know if they teach this in school in Europe,
no.
but the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Berlin Conference um, was where all the European nations came together to divide up Africa. That's why you have straight lines making up African nations that
Yeah,
didn't exist before. There are
yeah,
thousands upon thousands of tribes and kingdoms, and they just wrote on the map a straight line through the middle of rivers, mountains, deserts, things that you can't just draw a straight line through,
right, right.
you know? Uh, that needs to be repaired, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's for Africa to figure out, not for Europeans. And
Mm.
and it's for Africa to be able to use its resources how it sees fit,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
And you're such a important factor to that, because a colonized mind is one of the issues that we have as a community, where a lot of Black people are looking to opt out of being African. Specifically in America, I know there's a foundational Africans movement where they don't believe they actually came from Africa. They believe they're Indians and they're not actually Africans. And especially for you coming from Panama, you have every right to say, hey, look, I'm a migrant from Panama. I'm not from Africa, but you also are being truthful to your historical background, which is very, very important considering the influence you have on people. You know what I mean? And we really need that influence on the people, because together is where we're going to be able to kind of rehabilitate ourselves. I think the saying is always, the revolution will not be televised. Well, it's us right now who are on the internet. It's us who are encouraging each other, who are making it cool again to be African, who are making it cool to be revolutionary. I'm an African immigrant, so I remember I was born and raised in Europe, and you spend your whole time trying to run from being African. You spend your whole time trying to put on a British accent or put on an Irish accent. I'm raised in Ireland, by the way, in case you're wondering what the accent was. But you spend your whole time trying to do that, and run from being African as much as possible because of the way media, demonize that perception. So to see you with your platform do that and push that and be about that is really what we need, and more artists should be doing that. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And it has me thinking. Music has always been a powerful force for Pan Africanism. If we think about Fela Kuti, Bob Marley, where do you see the future of like Pan African music in this new generation?
Wow. Um, You mentioned Fela and Bob, who
Mm,
were unapologetically activists with their music.
mm,
Um, so to evoke the question about where I see Pan-Africanism using them as the examples is a bit difficult in this time where the
mm.
industry has matured. They were the beneficiaries of an immature industry. It was not industrious enough to recognize how to manipulate the message to maximize profit. Now it is. And Pan African music is going to pander to the money until there is someone who makes them feel like they are clowns. Until artists feel like they are clowns for chasing the money and they must serve the people. And there's going to be an artist that is going to do that. And I don't know who it is, but that character is someone that is as powerful or as attractive or as strong as like a Tupac who was there. He was
Mm.
there. He was doing the work actually. He
Mhm.
figured out how to do it. Um, we are in different times because it is very easy to be distracted. There are so many more channels of of communication, and
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
all of that distributes our attention.
Right.
So you see artists going to the craziest lengths just to get attention,
Mm-hmm.
doing the craziest things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and unfortunately, if that's what it takes, then it's going to be very difficult. But we have a shared fate, and I think probably not long before an emerging voice is recognized, and most people will fall in line. I think Kendrick is one of the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
more powerful voices right now, but it doesn't even have to be an American voice. You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
Fela and
Mm-hmm.
Bob, not
Mm-hmm.
American voices,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
very, very in tune with the American voice. Fela's
Mm-hmm.
music was inspired by African diaspora,
Mm-hmm.
right? He took elements of funk, elements of salsa, elements of music from Brazil and Africa, and then he put it all together. Where Bob was had spent time in the U.S. and because of his experience spending time in the U.S. and other parts of the world, he was able to galvanize this world perspective in his music. So, uh, yeah, it's hard to answer your question. I think that very difficult to see Pan African music being part of the solution. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's going to be more Pan African music making money,
Mm-hmm.
but it probably is going to be broken hearts and drugs. Maybe, maybe I'm wrong. We
And
let's hopefully someone will challenge that.
you said something so powerful there, which there's so many debates on, which almost alludes to a Illuminati-esque question. Not that I want to bring this weird question up, but of like the industry, it's become more robust in not allowing those kind of messages to pass through. I have wrestled with myself if that is a matter of a bunch of people in a boardroom who says this is how we want people to think, or it has been the other way around where the futility of this world has actually gotten to a place where this is what we hunger and thirst for, and the labels understand that, and then they just provide that. As someone who is in the industry, do you feel it's from the inwards out, or it's we as a world are becoming, as we create phones, as we the phones give us 2 second 7 second videos, and we become people who need things here and now, and we become futile in how we perceive the world, and less wholesome? Do we now hunger and thirst for less wholesome things, or do you think that they have purposely, especially as an industry, as someone who is in it, do do you think that they created that hunger?
So I'll answer it with this very, very complicated in this complicated way. The way that we consume music now is digital, based on algorithms. Algorithms are fueled by monitoring and analyzing consumption. And the people with the most discretionary time to consume are teenagers with an
Mm,
unrefined palate. The unrefined palate
mm,
means that they are subject to being manipulated easily, and um, they are going to pay attention to the most salacious and um, uh, you know
yeah,
the most salacious, crazy content.
yeah,
So
yeah.
think about this: you as an adult, you're walking down the street, you're walking in the center of the road, and on the left side and on the right side, there are two different things happening. On the left side, there's a couple and they're hugging.
Mm,
And on the right side, there's a couple and they're yelling at each other. Which
mm,
side are you going to pay attention to longer?
mm. A couple yelling, I guess.
So that's you as an adult male. So when you have a teenager who has all the time in the world to 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 build this algorithm, they're going to
Mm,
go for conflict every time,
mm,
right? And so that friction is what the model is built on. As much as we know that we should be paying attention to the non-friction, this is what should be molding us and instructing us on how to
mm.
live, the hug, right? We will pay attention to the friction, and you are what you eat. So the more that you consume that, the more you become that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's my way of answering your question. I'm not going to say it's Illuminati. This is just human nature. And
Right.
unfortunately, it's human nature used against human nature. And it becomes a recursive loop. And so what our elders always knew, right? The whole concept of don't go alone. The reason why even proverbs exist in every culture is because the
Mm-hmm.
wisdom of the ages and the elders is that, oh, we recognized this loop and we learned how to hack and cut that
Mm-hmm.
loop off and build over here, right? What technology has done in order for money to be made is it disregards the age-old wisdom and gives us that recursive loop again.
We've got such a prideful generation that we think we're gurus before we've even seen up and halfway down the road. And we actually hate, that's one of the things I always go on about. We hate elders. We hate that kind of mentorship that comes from, you know what I mean, years beyond us, because
Yeah.
we feel that we know everything. I think maybe because we have so much information, we're just a generation that feels like we know everything. So it's very interesting to hear your answer on that. Thank you so much for that. And just wanted to know, you sound like you've thought and pondered on that before. Have you, or was that just straight off the top?
This is stuff that I think about quite often, and
Mm,
it's how I've ultimately come to understand the reality of our times.
mm,
And I'm happy to be questioned on it and challenged, but I don't
mm.
know. I don't know if I can see it any other way unless someone
Wow.
really, really shakes the foundation of my theory.
Mm. So now, for a fun question. If you could create a dream Pan African collaboration, bringing together artists from across Africa, the Caribbean, America, and Europe, who would you put on that track?
Hmm. I mean, I'm a sucker for a lot of music from the early days. So one of my very favorite Pan-African artists is Jorge Ben from Brazil.
Mm,
He was a freedom fighter. He would use his music to speak truth to power. He was powerful. I would put him. Um, I would put the energy of Tupac, and Thomas Mapfumo,
Mm.
all together. So three different continents. I think that would be special. I mean, even I would take Tupac off just to not be so obvious and offer names that fewer people know. Eugene McDaniels. I would
Mm.
say he was the first and one of the only really, really targeted artists who created music that was saying something, but he was silenced by the US government. So Eugene McDaniels, Thomas Mafumo, and Georgia Ben.
Lovely, lovely. I've got to search some of them up. I'm only young, Aloe.
That's all right. I mean, that's
It's
the
probably
whole
before my
purpose of this.
time.
I'm intentional about those artists.
I'm only 28, Aloe. First, maybe some of them were before I was born, but thank you. I'm gonna go check them up. Okay, so new project, new era. Does it very much feel like a new era for you?
It is a new era. Every album for me is a new
It
era
is, yeah.
because I can go in so many different directions.
Mm-hmm.
This new project is very intentional and thoughtful about amplifying community.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm ready to get started on the next one. There's so many songs that I've never released, and I just want the world to be able to hear everything that I'm doing. So I'll probably share everything on social media before I release them, just to just to be open and transparent with my fans.
Mm. That's a good question, actually. How long have you been writing it? How long have you been? Because it sounds like you've had some, you prepared to put some out that were in the vault for quite some time.
Oh, there are songs that are, you know, 20 years old. There are songs that are very old,
Mm.
10 years old. Things that I've just didn't fit any project before.
Mm.
So I didn't know where to put them. Odd
Mm.
ends, loose ends.
Mm. And we pray that this will be a very successful project and it will put you right back in your rightful place as one of I want to say, they always say this thing in the comment section whenever they like an artist. They say, we made the right person famous.
Hmm.
So basically, yeah, basically someone they're like, yeah, this is not just one of them fools. This is the real one. So your voice is going to be back in a place where I guess it's buzzing, new hits, new this. How do you see yourself using your voice? You know what I mean? Over the next couple of years, decades, whatever, and not just musically, but even socially.
Um, socially, I've always been an advocate for the most vulnerable, working in the US at least around criminal justice reform. Um, Internationally, there is so much to fight for. And while everybody's up in arms about the Israelis killing Palestinians
Mm-hmm.
um, right now, there is also the global infrastructure around extraction from Africa
Mm-hmm.
that kills millions of Africans
Mm-hmm.
annually. And there are proxy wars that are set up by global powers using rebel armies and
Mm-hmm.
mercenary armies in the Congo or other parts that needs to stop, you know? So to the whatever extent I can be effective in communicating to the public at large, but specifically leaders of technology companies that rely heavily on earth minerals from Africa, that we as consumers don't want blood in our products. That's going to be one of my rallying cries.
I'm about to get deep on you, big bro. You tapped into a space that a lot of black artists dream of. And I'm gonna come out and say it. You got the white crowd. Sometimes
Mm.
a lot of black artists, they might get the hip hop crowd, they might get the urban crowd, but you catapulted into a realm of universalness. It crossed backgrounds, and that's when you know you're really impactful. So As you move into what you're going to move into now, do you feel the risk of, because that's a major thing, right? Like when you think about even how many Americans voted for Trump, when you think about how many people are pro Elon Musk and pro guys like these vicious movements, do you feel like, and a lot of your listeners would be being from those backgrounds, would be someone who like, oh, I love Aloe Blacc, you know? Do you feel that weight of that risk of like, oh, this may affect my music? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So, um, my goal is to always give everybody an opportunity to be part of the solution.
Mm,
So I don't want to alienate anyone.
mm,
Um, and even the perpetrators need to be called in for transformation. So as
mm,
soon as you alienate them, you offer a chance for them to never rehabilitate.
mm,
So my thought is, how do I create the right sound, style, music that captures everybody and then gives them an opportunity to listen what I have to say outside of the music or within the
right,
lyrics
right.
in the interviews. And I remember when I was younger, there was an amazing band called Rage Against the Machine.
Mm,
And I thought the machine only knows hate and anger. So if you keep raging against the machine, that's just like fighting fire with fire. What
mm,
if what if we love it to death, right?
mm,
And so that's what's been my concept for a long time is to show the humanity of my blackness, right?
mm,
To ex to reach escape velocity and just become an individual recognized as a human being, as a citizen. You know, some of our greatest artists, that's where the greatest black artists transcended race at a certain point to the to the to get to a place where they're just their name.
yeah,
It's not the black artist Michael Jackson, it's just Michael.
right.
You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? Whereas when you think of other artists, yeah, you're like, oh, that's a black artist.
right, right, right,
Um,
right, right.
I always felt it unfair and limiting uh,
Yeah,
because of the way that the U.S. in particular
yeah,
uh, created the radio programming, calling it race music, and then
right.
creating R&B and subjugating all black people to R&B, whether or not you're making rock or whatever, you know. And um, I don't, I feel like the way that I operate is to call everybody in, um, and to avoid the tropes that will relegate me to
Mm-hmm,
race music.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
So,
universal themes.
mm, but you should be given your credit because it certainly is a risk. I think, like I said to you, I mentioned that I do music, and I often, I might go on a while where I'm really into politics and really talking about it, and then I often feel certain people who came from music tune out because they're like, you're talking about all this stuff. I don't really care about this stuff. I just put back on the song that you did, and then you get the other way around where there's people who really count on you to be talking about subjects that matter, and then they're kind of like, okay, can you put the mic down for a second and let's talk about what's happening in America. Let's talk about what's happening in Africa right now. And then it's a tough one. So it is always a risk that you should be given a huge amount of credit for, that you go and you lead with that. And you don't just say, listen, guys, like I know a few artists who say, I don't know nothing about Black Lives Matter. I've Black Lives has always mattered. I'm not going to mention the artists who said that, but people who just do stuff like this or take a pardoning by Trump and then support Trump moving forward because they're just thinking about their career and nothing else. And so, you've obviously heed the risk to some degree, and you go in and say, listen, I've done what will keep my conscience clear, and Whatever happens after that is what matters. So that should be commended. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Yeah,
Um,
sure.
but
I just
and
I
I go
feel
go
like
ahead, sir. Go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, I feel like you've got to balance. So
Mm,
you want to be effective and you don't want to
mm,
be ineffective. So find the
mm,
best way to be effective for the longest amount of time.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I'll take that advice. At Pan African Lifestyle, we often say it's not about where you're from, it's about where we're going together. What is your vision for the global Black community, culturally, economically, and spiritually in the next 25 years?
Wow. The next 25 years, you have a very, very healthy continent of Africa where the nations of Africa are in control of their resources and benefiting globally from um, the extraction and distribution and use. In other parts of the world, you've got leadership positions held by uh, Pan Africans, and a different relationship socially, where blackness is not demonized.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
is celebrated
Mm-hmm.
and it is recognized as equal.
Mm-hmm. So here at PAL, we always love to ask every guest, what is your definition of the African dream?
Wow. Oh, I never thought about it. And so give me some uh, latitude in my answer. But definition of the African dream is that I always think about Africa as a land of abundance, and that you can have um, a thriving, beautiful, happy life with multi generations,
Mm-hmm.
and safety from
Mm-hmm.
the day you're born to the day you die.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is the African dream. And what does that look like? It could be as simple as a one bedroom apartment, but you smile every day. It could be
Mm-hmm.
it could be, mansions, but you smile every day.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, again, they come from Panama. And one thing that I recognize whenever I visit there is the people are still happy. They don't have everything we have in the US, but they're still happy. There's food
Mm-hmm.
everywhere that grows on the
Mm-hmm.
trees,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and and so as long as they have their family, they have a roof and they have food, they're good.
Aloe Blacc, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been so insightful to get to know you on a personal level. And I am even a bigger fan after today, just knowing that you are so driven for me, for my son, for my sisters, and everything that you do is selfless, but you're thinking about the community and how you can forward our community and heal the community. So thank you so much on behalf of the PAL show, on behalf of the PAL listeners. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat today and speak about your project. I'm looking forward to it. We're all looking forward to it. And you're going to smash it yet again as you are an iconic artist.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Alo. God bless.
You will. Take care.